So, welcome everybody to episode 24, the UFO Phenomena, Cylindrical Craft. So, this is kind of a personal thing Junk and I have been kind of doing on the side. He searches for it more than I do, but one thing that I very much try to do is interpret the pictures very well and, put a sci-fi lens on it in terms of how it practically would make sense in terms of, what we're looking at and what it could be, what it is, versus, all of that fun jazz. So, getting right into it, what are cylindrical and / cigar-shaped craft, and how commonplace are they in our skies / solar system? So, one thing to note is what I have noticed, and I think Junk can attest to this, a lot of these craft do not land. They just stay in low Earth orbit or go into deep space. From my understanding, they're developed in space, they're built in space, and they're mainly to serve a purpose in space. They don't come into atmosphere. I'm sure they can, but they just don't need to. They're fucking massive. They wouldn't be able to park anywhere. Just put it that way. I mean, the only place they could logistically park is out in the middle of nowhere, probably in a military base that has a hangar specifically designed. But even then, they would probably send down a much smaller scout ship that would genuinely generally look the same size, but it'd just be much, 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 much smaller. Because one thing that him and I have really noticed lately is that they're just getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and longer too, which is fascinating. So this is kind of a 3D rendering. We don't have any physical photos of them, but we have radar imaging. We have quick video of them going across, NASA footage, and we have very good descriptions of what they look like and how they're built. So one thing to note is that the idea around these is that they are you got to think of it as a highly advanced submarine. They're built like a submarine. They're thought of like a submarine. They're designed for that compact, long traversal type of, usage. You're only supposed to go and dock for a little while, and then you're off doing more missions. It's very interesting how they go about it. It's very materialistic, and the way to understand how space travel is navigated, you got to think of it in terms of the sea, because it's all ships. It's not, airplanes. You're not using aerodynamics. You're sailing the waves of space, essentially. So this is, I would say, smaller versions of the cylinder or cigar-shaped UFO. As I was saying, the scout ships, we've only really ever seen these up on NASA footage, and after they're seen and they're very pronounced, they cut the footage. They just cut it. Because if you continue the footage and you just let people sit with that, you're, in a sense, you're acknowledging it. If you take it off, you're essentially saying, "Oh, that's a glitch. That's not supposed to be there. That's a glitch. We'll figure that out and get you more footage in the coming weeks and get you back to your regularly scheduled programming." So, and one of the things too is if they have the right frame, somebody can enhance said frame and start seeing details, and they don't want you to see the details. Because if you see the details, you can then cross-reference the design, how things are designed, and then you can go, okay, this is kind of similar to Raytheon and how they do their stuff, and Lockheed Martin. Because at the end of the day, that's who designed and built all of this stuff in conjunction with the U.S. and the world government. Junk, do you have anything to add?
Yes, Star Wars was a documentary. I just want to get that out there. No,
hold on. Before you go any further, I think Junk or Mr. I'm blanking on his name. Vale would get mad at you. Star Trek is a little bit more in line with that one.
Yes,
He
indeed,
would
indeed,
debate you all night for that.
indeed. Um, yeah, this is actually something that's extremely near and dear to my heart because ever since, and you'll see it in a minute, but some time period in 2019, I started recording these because I was starting to observe the LASCO C2, C3 satellites that are basically 24-hour viewfinders of the sun and its radius. So basically all the space between Earth and the sun, lots goes on, and it is a large space of happening. And what I found was a rhythm of commonplace sightings. I mean, sure, you get comets here and there and different debris, but what I found absolutely fascinating were these cylindrical cigar-shaped UFOs that kept appearing. And it wasn't just an anomaly. I mean, the first few that I found, I was hopeful. I said, oh, this is really cool. This might be something. But then it became a pattern and more showed up and more. And I found out that they're not just alone, that they're in fleets, and that this could be something much larger than what I even considered. And it's interesting that we have yet to achieve full disclosure from the mainstream media, yet we are gifted a porthole into the cosmos to find it on our own. And there's so many UFO sightings, so many testimonials out there of not only cylindrical craft, but also saucer craft, etc. And I believe that this is how it has to happen. That if the entire populace were to come to the understanding that these things exist, it'd be a little chaotic. So just explaining the cigar-shaped phenomena, it is basically, as Scuba said, massive craft that primarily reside in space, within our orbit or within the moon's orbit. And these, I think, Scuba, you made a great, point in that they, especially if we're going to be considering that they are of our own creation, i.e. humanity and black budget, etc., then they are going to have some human elements, human metals, human rivets, human design. So I personally, after seeing all of these things, I wouldn't necessarily attest that these are more or less the light craft that we see that are organic and have almost a consciousness of their own, but more so just machinery that has been built, as you said, with the submarine element, because you have to realize that when we go back to World War II and we think about the technologies they had, mainly the U-boat, that was something that was very prominent at the time. And what was powerful about it is that you were able to put human beings in a concealed hull that was able to withstand insane pressure. And that same pressure can be applied to space. So it's a very interesting dynamic to think that we moved from oceans to space. And, again, this is all speculation because it's really hard to finalize the details of this. Another thing, Scuba, I found a long time ago was that the Mayans had similar style cylindrical craft. So I don't know if these are of the same or if it's influenced by one or the other through archaeological discovery and
you make a very, very beautiful point. Not even going into the testimony, quote unquote, of Mr. Corey Good, because he talked a lot about the Mayans, but just going off of what I know and what I understand is that they didn't just disappear. They left. They understood the foundations of the universe, and they were like, all right, we're gone. Bye. Bye, guys. Have fun. Figure it out. We'll see you later. And that's what they did. And, they understand, they're fourth, fifth density beings. They understand what's at stake. They understand the process. They are our literal cousins from planet Earth. That's a very interesting and number one point that we must understand, is that the Mayans come from Earth. They are part of this process. We won't see them until it's time. We won't see their craft until it's time, because they are such a, from what I understand, from different channeled material, again, not from Corey Good, different channeled material, from the Hopis, from, all over the place, because the Mayans have touched everywhere. They haven't just touched only Mexico and that area of New Mexico and Arizona. They've very much branched out everywhere. It's just the main section, of course, is Mexico and all of that, because that's where they're from. But for the majority of it, the Mayans left and they did their own thing. They traveled the cosmos. They didn't need planet Earth anymore because they already survived the school. That's what we're doing now. But the thing is that we got hijacked during World War II when they started developing in secret. The moment you start developing in secret and you start, devising a way of controlling the planet versus leaving it and allowing the other more primitive species to develop and grow on their own, because that's the progressive of time. That's all civilizations on planet Earth have progressed through the ages, through learning, through advancements in consciousness, through the sun giving them higher energies, through extraterrestrials giving them knowledge of different methods to go about things, i.e. the calendar, telling time, agriculture, all that fun jazz. So Junk made a very good point by bringing up the Mayans, where they could be coming to visit. Me personally, I don't fully buy that. I can't buy that, because they're just too fourth, fifth density at this point. If they're coming to say hi, they're coming to say hi to your dreams first. Junk, you wanted to say something?
Yeah. Well, see, this is where my intuition is going, is that the Nazis, and if you've watched any Indiana Jones ever, you'll realize that there was an obsession with traversing many of these ancient routes and learning and adapting those technologies in modern day. So it could be something to the degree of them like going through archaeological study, finding remnants of some of these Mayan craft, or at least the idea of the craft, and then generating that same style in their own architectural design. So that was where that lead was going. But
do you have any info on this photo? Because I'm going to be honest, this to me feels like a Mayan craft. This doesn't feel like Secret Space Program. And the reason why I say that is, with Secret Space Program, you have oddities in the shape. You have modularity with the shape. With this feels like one solid piece of construction, if I'm honest.
Yeah, no, I mean, you have to take these photos and then also Oumuamua into connection. These craft, again, are, as you said, one solid manufacturing, which is kind of beyond our technology.
Natural. That's the important thing. They're natural. They're not metals. They have metal components, but for the majority of it, they are made of stone. They are made of wood. They aren't made of metals. It's fascinating how they go about that. Continue.
No, it is. And something, especially when we started bringing this up on Mystery School, was your connection with the more modern cigar craft with being modular, which is explaining the intensive size and length of, which we'll get into. I know we have many photos to go through, but you're going to see that these craft, as Scuba said, come in a variety of forms. And it seems that there is a cohesion, that there is smaller craft almost like the nestling doll that mirror the bigger doll, but aren't necessarily to scale in size. It's the motherships, the ones that, good God, could probably be the diameter of a planet, like that large, just out there in the cosmos. And I do feel like if we think about military and we think about what they do, this is completely up their alley in adaptation. It's kind of like if you were to have a firearm and you want to make the firearm better, then you add attachments and the attachments go on to the attachments. It's the same methodology of applying a more augmented, enhanced craft that you can use. And what I found, and it does have a sinister route too, is that being of human design, that some of these craft aren't necessarily of benevolent origin, but rather they are cargo containers of many different forms. Scuba, I don't know how far you want to take this conversation because it gets really dark really fast. But all I'm going to say is that it carries many, many forms of cargo, of which are completely unethical.
Solar Warden, and then we'll really start going into that, because Solar Warden is a very interesting dynamic with this whole thing. So, but yeah, cargo is a very key thing with this whole conversation, and kind of what I said to you earlier, Hope. It's very key. So we'll leave that for later. But going back to scale, they're fucking massive. So this is what I would consider a scout ship. Something aircraft carrier size, something that can relatively land on Earth, be docked. It's only carrying a few hundred to a few thousand versus, the bigger ones carrying tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands for all we know. I mean, people are small compared to these massive machines. So this is, I don't even know how to pronounce that, but yeah, you got to understand this is a German secret space program. So a lot of the ship names are going to be German. It sucks, I know, but that's just how it is. So basically, I'm going to read off what the top of it says, what I can, because it's a little blurry for me too. So date of commission, 1988. Type, classified interplanetary exploration craft. Purpose, according to famed internet hacker Gary McKinnon, these spacecraft are part of Solar Warden program, and the U.S. currently operates 8 of these ships. They are said to be part of a secret military space program spearheaded by the U.S. Naval Space Weapons Division, my lab. McKinnon found several files listing non-terrestrial officers as well as ship-to-ship transfers with names that don't exist in the U.S. Navy, namely the USS Hill and Cotier, like I said, I'm butchering it, and the USS Curtis LeMay. One of the photos he managed to view as, in his words, above Earth's atmosphere. It kind of looked like a satellite. It was a cigar shaped and had a geodisc domes above, below, and to the left and right on both ends of it. Although it was a low resolution image, it was quite close up. These craft are said to be longer than 2 football fields placed at the end and nearly as long as an aircraft carrier. But combined with the testimony from my lab whistleblower, oh God, no, I'm not, sorry, I can't read that. No. It's Corey Good, no. But given that this program would have begun in the late 80s, it is reasonable to assume it would look like something produced by a joint venture between all of the top aerospace manufacturers of the time: Lockheed, Northrop, Boeing, and British Aerospace. So, with that said, we'll get into Gary McKinnon, but with that said, it's, I still would consider this something like a scout ship because, those files are now 23 years old. They're old. And they were old when he looked at them. They were from the 80s and the 90s, and he discovered it in the early 2000s. So, you know, we have developed much more since the 80s, you know. And it's funny Junk mentioned Star Wars because I really want you to think about the Star Wars initiative in 1980 and how much money was poured into that to build a satellite that failed. Since when does the U.S. government fail on making any type of weapons when they have the journal and access of Nikola Tesla? That doesn't make sense. To really think about that one, because I have thought about that for a long time. Back when I was in high school, when my history teacher told me about Star Wars, and he really went in depth about the program and why it failed. And I'm sitting there pre-full awakening, just going, that doesn't make sense. If I know the U.S. government as I do now, wanting to join the military at that time, that did not make sense to me. Why would you pour that much money into a program and then publicly say, sorry, it didn't work, we wasted all this money? That doesn't happen. Not in the military standards. They utilize their budgets to the core. They waste money just so they could fill their budget. So there's no way that this whole thing would fail. They would have been throwing money at every possible science initiative imaginable. Under wraps, of course. So, something to think about. And just to give you kind of a perspective of what the cockpits and what, you know, the areas inside possibly look like. I mean, again, scale. You got tiny little human and a little table there and massive fucking windows that allow you to see everything. So, and to give context, I would assume these are the different gravity fields that the ship is emitting to allow it to travel through space, because the means of propulsion is manipulating gravity. So, who is Gary McKinnon, and why is Solar Warden important when discussing cylindrical craft? So, Gary McKinnon. When Gary McKinnon hacked into hacked into NASA's hard drives, some of the information he found was related to a black budget program known as Solar Warden. This program supposedly came into existence in tandem with the Star Wars Space Defense Initiative, and McKinnon came across information that seemed to indicate that the operation consisted of 8 enormous motherships and approximately 40 smaller vessels. So let's think about this. In terms of a mothership, all right? A basic mothership. So Independence Day, that's a good reference for a mothership, right? It had fucking 7 continental smaller craft hovering over cities and states. The scale is unimaginable if you really think about it. You know, 8 motherships and 40 smaller ships. So that's then too. Who knows what they have now? Probably 12. Because one thing to note, they take a long time to build. These motherships take a very, very long time to build. Like decades to build. So don't think it's quick. It takes a long time. There's a big process into it. You know, and the reason why I know that is because I know somebody who works on actual aircraft carriers at one of the last shipping yards in the U.S. One of the last side drop shipping yards that work in the U.S. Basically, a side drop is instead of launching the ship at an incline, they just throw it in the water. They just tip it on its side and throw it in the water. But he went into the process of how they build it, and I'm sitting there thinking about it, and it's like, wow. So imagine modular materials that go together a little bit easier than aircraft carrier parts, but at the same time, you still need to, map out the electrical components. You need to map out the wiring. You need to map out the power, proper power plugs, the operating systems for all of the navigation systems. Somebody to manage and provide maintenance. Also, that person needs to be paid for, fed, and the secret must never come out, which I have a very interesting theory on that, but that is a whole other conversation, because that leads into why we haven't had disclosure sooner and why they're able to keep this secret. But regardless, it really makes you think, when you see how long our normal aircraft carriers take and how many millions of dollars, how many billions of dollars are poured into that, but you look at a mothership and possible trillions of dollars have been poured into that, and we would never know about it because, $23 trillion have just gone missing, if not more. So, we're talking trillions of dollars for a mothership, $23 trillion missing from the United States Treasury and different parts of the world. And even adding the different parts of the world with different values of currency, we're talking, several hundreds, if not several millions of trillions. And I don't know what that, I don't know the calculations. That's too many zeros. But it's a lot of money. And it's a lot of resources poured into this. Now, Solar Warden. Solar Warden is to be believed as the first established naval command in space. It was originally run by the Nazis. That was their first attempt at all of this. It was later on, after World War II, when the Space Reich, as I like to coin them, took over in the United States as the new Fourth Reich. So, you have that dynamic going on. It was much later that the United States was inoculated into Solar Warden, so they were already taking orders. So, we have to understand that there are people within the secret space program that want to just push a button and release everything on us. They want to do that. I know that. They're red-blooded Americans. There's no way they wouldn't want to do that, regardless if they have many generations of living in space. They have that history. They have that care. It's just, unfortunately, the majority of it are space Nazis that hate us. I have to be real. I have to rip off that Band-Aid. They hate us. They despise us. If they really, really wanted to, they could blow us up. But the problem is that the ETs that are much, 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 much more powerful than they are, tell them no. And if you do that, we will rain fire upon your entire existence. So it's a very interesting dynamic where we have cloak and dagger going on inside the secret space program that I very much believe is going on. It's just a slow process, as we're going through too, because although we have many generations of military personnel and many generations of Nazi personnel, it is the same battle going on that's been going on for the last 80 years. It's just on a different playing field. It sucks, I know, but that's where we're at. In terms of the secret space program, in terms of this here, that's a whole nother topic. Junk, you want to go in before we talk about?
You kind of a little echo. Dust test. You opened the can of the worms a little bit. That I kind of wanted to explore the idea too of reptilians and their influence on humanity, which we could see, of course, if you trace Nazi roots with the Glock Bell, the first, or I guess supposed UFO, or how do we say, experiment with anti-gravity. And
yeah, it was more of an experiment because, to give context, Die Glock is the German name for the bell, We must understand this was not an actual craft that flew. It only hovered in a room. It was attached to chains. It was only just a proof of concept. It was never a craft. I hate that concept that it was a craft. No, it wasn't. It was way too small to fit anybody in that thing.
Yeah, so essentially that technology just doesn't land in your lap unless you've been given it. So if there has been some reptilian influence in the past, chances are that they are heavily involved in the cigar exchange, because when you start to get craft that are not only able to peruse the solar system, but even go interstellar, is something of which you need assistance. And I personally don't believe that, aside from the Mayans, that we're really getting the assistance to leave our solar system as of now, with everything going on with the sun, etc. It's hard for me to think that Pleiadian, Arcturian influence would just say, okay, here you go, here are your ships, get off Earth and get in, go explore the universe, go to Andromeda, etc. There's a reason for being here. Sorry, what was that?
Not yet, anyways. There still has to a lot to happen first. But
yeah, of course, it's a process. But essentially, you take that into consideration and you think the opposite polarization, a self-serving initiative, i.e., of which the reptilians spearhead, and of course the Nazis have kept prominently in their own agenda. So if we really expand this out and we see how World War II shifted to America and how we got all the scientists, and then moving into the development of these secret technologies, it would make sense that it would be influenced by a more malevolent kind of interference rather than a peaceful escorting, meaning that there has to be a trade. And it gets dark and grim really, really fast, but I do believe that we're not necessarily fully interconnected with the galactic dimensionals out there, the ones that are more highly advanced in their own technological procession. However, there's that one kid in class that everybody hates that, has the shiny new toy and isn't letting anybody else play with it. And that's what we're seeing in our skies with the cigar phenomena. They're real. I can tell you this. Without a shadow of a doubt, they're real. It's not a matter of if, it's just where are they going and what are they doing? Because you have, and I do want to bounce back really quick to Oumuamua, because that was our mainstream disclosure on such craft, but not phrased as a craft. They correct me if I'm wrong, Scuba. I think they called it a comet, or they called it some kind of rocky body.
Yeah, they called it a large asteroid, but it's funny because wordplay is everything in this, and they very much danced around the idea of them knowing what it was, but them being completely clueless to what it was.
Yeah, so I think that was our first official disclosure, because they wanted to maybe test the waters, see what the public thought, if there was such a thing, because we haven't seen asteroids in the shape of cylindrical, shapes. We've only ever seen them as these bulbous rock formations. And so it's fascinating to see how so many were interested. And I remember when the story broke, we were all, absolutely inspired by it. And the fact that it went to the closest innermost orbit of our solar system and then navigated outward is, there's no chance of that. That is absolute. And it's hard to say if this was solar warden related or even human design related, or if this was one of the ancient craft. There's so much obscurity. As you're going to see in a moment, Scuba and I have compiled a list, or a series of photos of captures, and we can only really see the reflective nature of these craft. We can't see details of, close-up textures. So we have to really speculate, but I think it's important to get it from all sides, realizing that this is both a man-made phenomena and then also something of extraterrestrial or, terrestrial origin that has surpassed our own awareness.
Absolutely. Beautifully said. So, what does this phenomenon mean in the context of William Tompkins' testimonial? So, to give a little context, William Tompkins is to be, as he said before he died in 2017, the day of the eclipse, is that he used to work for the secret space program and that he helped design a lot of different craft as well as the cigar-shaped craft. He let in a lot of insight. He released a lot of photos, a lot of documents that, regardless of who he was interviewed by, they jumped on the opportunity. We can't blame them for that. They were fitting their narrative. He was just trying to get his story out before he died. That's completely understandable. It went viral, which is still fascinating to say the least. So one thing to note is that, again, he described himself designing, helped building, overseeing the funding of these cigar-shaped craft in the 70s and 80s. And it's, that was him in the 70s. And, he helped design the means of the propulsion. He was the electrical engineer. Like, he knew a lot about what was going into the design of all of these crafts. And I understand that his credibility is completely and utterly tarnished because of who he was interviewed by when he was bringing his story out, and he gravitated towards them and he stuck by them. We can't blame the guy for doing that because A, it got him views, B, it got his word out there as fast and as big as possible. If he was just going to any Joe Schmo, his word wouldn't have made a mile. So we got to give him credit for that. He got his word out, and it was a very good one. One that they had to formulate their story around because his was better than theirs. So just got to give that some context. Also, welcome, Dylan. We are straight in the thick of it talking about UFOs.
Hello, everybody. How's it going? Yeah, cigar craft's very important, and I assume you were just talking about William Tompkins, which
Yes.
I read a lot about him in the Michael Sala book, Secret Space Program. Some good information, even though the Corey Goode, Jordan Sather group was rotten at the core, there was a little bit of good around the fringes. And it would seem that William Tompkins knew what he was talking about for sure.
This photo Junk sent to me today, I was reading over it and looking at it, and I didn't even know this. This is something that I missed that he talked about, was these tanker crafts that are found to be dispensing gases over Carsland Bend, Florida. He claimed that the photo was taken by a couple and later analyzed by specialists at Northrop in San Diego. And it's fascinating. I mean, you see the two different crafts, and then the dispersal method, and then the entire just area in town over here. And if it's for mind control, if it's for weather modification, it's a fascinating feat. And the fact that he knew this and was a part of this, makes him a bad guy. But at the end of the day, he came forward on his last days. You got to give him some credit. He probably faced the most ridicule anybody could ever have within his own personal sphere of people that he tried to remember. One of the key things is tried to remember, because a lot of these a lot of these dark budget things wipe memories. And that's, again, a conversation within itself. Because go for it, Jeff.
I have a quote from William Tompkins that we should just listen to and really think about, because it gives us a sense of size and scale. He says, I redefined a standard naval space battle group complement, stating that it would consist of one 2.5 kilometer spacecraft carrier with a 2-star on board as flag, 3 to 4 1.4K heavy space cruisers, 4 to 5 1K space destroyers, 2 2K space landing assault ships for drop missions, 2 2K space logistics support ships, and 2 2K space personal transports. So it's as we were speculating before, and as we can see clearly in the evidence that we've compiled, that there are scout ships. There are larger ships and there are smaller ships. So the ones that hover within the Earth's atmosphere, low altitude, those are more so the scout ones. And the long, modular, multi-kilometer long craft are more so the motherships.
And it's even more fascinating that, we can sit here and say that he was probably doctored and he was probably consoled behind the scenes and all of that. But at the end of the day, a 90-year-old man coherently said that and many other things, and just profusely gave out more documents, more pictures, more evidence, and more stories. I mean, the man was fascinating, and it's even more synchronistic that he died on the eclipse. Whatever could be said, if they did it just to help, or let them run with the story, whatever. He died on the eclipse, and it's fascinating, and we can speculate all night, but it's still one thing to note that he did pass away at over 90, telling this story and passing away the day of contact in the desert, 2017, the day of the eclipse. Very fascinating. So why is it, with all of the evidence of these craft existing, there hasn't been full disclosure? So while we go through this question and while we explain it, I'm going to start unveiling a little bit of what Junk has personally been looking through. So let me get here. We're going to go to this. There we go. Wonderful. So 2019, this is when it started it all for him. Go to full screen. That one right there. Look at that. November 7th, 2019. Junk, tell us about this moment, bud.
Oh, man, I'm getting major nostalgia. That was my first capture. I was really excited when I saw this. This was one of the most prominent because what you can initially see, again, if you ever look through the LASCO data, you're going to notice that there are plenty of objects with scattering material, and these are more or less asteroids and comets going through the sky, a bunch of space junk, etc., micrometeorites, whatever. And what we see here is a cohesive design, rounded at each point and highlighted by the light of the sun. And just for reference, because we're going to go through a lot of these pictures, what you're looking at in the very center, that dark circle, is a camera sensor blinder so that it doesn't burn out the sensor of the camera viewing. And that dark line that's shooting off to diagonally to the left, that is the holder. That's the arm of the blocker. And the white circle in the very center of that dark circle is the true size of the sun. So just reference that as we move forward. But this was a very special capture for me. And, seeing is believing. It really kickstarted something very passionate in me to continue on dissecting these compilations that, if you look at a regular one, and Scuba, I'm going to send you a link. Maybe I did before, but I'm going to send you another link so we can get an understanding of how fast the images go by and how it could be misled or seen by the public. So we'll do that later. But
Yep,
yeah.
absolutely. So, as I asked before we really go through all of these photos, why haven't we gotten disclosure yet? My answer to that is because it's already here. Disclosure is already here. It's not coming fast because we're not making it fast enough. This stuff right here, showing people this, making people see that this is not measured by light. You are not witnessing light reflections. You are witnessing a heat signature. That is the only way something like that could be shown, is by a heat signature. Well, actually, no. This specific lens is light, but there's another lens that uses only infrared. My mistake. I just butchered that. I'm going to refrain. Holy crap. My bad. I always get that confused. That blue and red. I'm sorry. My bad. Whew. That would have been dumb of me. So yeah, this is reflecting off of light, but this one, this is heat. This is a heat signature. And literally 3 days later, his second find, and I would assume this is zoomed in, right? Or like it's a little grainy. Did you zoom in and screenshot this, or is this like the way the frame was?
No, in my early days of capturing, I had the export setting at like 240, so it's like real crap imagery, but it's enough for you to see what's going on. And yeah, I want to make the differential really quick because I think it's important. When we look at LASCO, and let me pull this up. So this is LASCO C2. So, and Scuba, feel free to forward that to the mystery group chat so they can see it for themselves. But LASCO C2, well, basically, let me just explain what these things are. They're images, they're SOHO. It's a SOHO project, but they're satellites that have a large angle spectromic coronagraph, which you're seeing basically just stating that we're looking at the space between Earth and the Sun. It's a portal through this space. And what's fascinating is it makes me realize that all the sightings you're about to see are only through one angle. What else is going on around us? That's the crazy part. That's what you got to really speculate. But LASCO C2, of course, is an infrared instrument. So you're going to see, as Scuba mentioned, a different signature in the actual photography. And then the blue one is just regular. It helps differentiate what kind of instruments we're using. But I find that if a craft, given its ability to cloak, would be unable to cloak in infrared. So it's fascinating what you're going to see in the reds that come up in the following series. But Scuba, I do want to answer your question, or at least speak on it a little bit. Why hasn't there been UFO disclosure? Well, in general, it's been trying to happen. I mean, we are at a very interesting point in history where if you were to ask anybody on the street, do they believe UFOs exist? You'd probably get 7 out of 10 saying yes. And that is huge from where we were. And we're getting, and all these mini pieces of disclosure from the military and, all, whatever you want to call those things. But what I find more fascinating than, little tic tacs or whatever they want to prescribe to us through this limited lensing of military apparatus is these giant craft that you at home can find, that you don't have to wait for mainstream media to plaster it on CNN. It's right here, and it's for those who seek disclosure. That's why Scuba made a great point, is disclosure is now. It's you. It's us. It doesn't matter if it needs to be told to normies. What is a UFO to a normie? So you know what I mean? Like, you have to context it in that phrase too, because when we see UFOs, it expands our understanding of the cosmos. And I think that is what's truly trying to be suppressed. We're trying to be limited on all fronts, not necessarily thinking beyond the scope of what 3D reality they want to push upon us. So that is also a control mechanism as well.
I also want to make note that another control mechanism is that now we are starting to see Trump's Trump's Space Force branch of the military come out and say that we are probably going to have to worry about threats. I want to reiterate this so highly. If we really had a genuine threat of extraterrestrial beings that cannot fight the space Nazis, like the space Nazis cannot fight them, they are destroying them at every turn, we would see some sort of battle. We would see some sort of, damage, wreckage. There would be something going on in the atmosphere that we can observe with the naked eye. Because, there could be explosions there, if they're really fighting something that is so scary, it would be an impending doom. It would be pretty much almost here, fighting throughout the entire defenses. Because one thing that we must understand, and Junk has said this many times, and I am going to say this, there are so many of them just chilling in orbit, it's ridiculous. I'm going to reiterate that. There are so many just chilling in orbit, it is ridiculous. We have a very large fear of a planet. The International Space Station is a small porthole. A picture of from a satellite is a small porthole. A 3D rendered Google Maps satellite image is a small porthole to the grand scheme of the entire planet Earth, because there are military bases out in the desert, there's military bases out in the jungle, there's military bases out in the mountains. They could hide and come down from absolutely anywhere. So that's a point that I must reiterate, that if we were really in danger from an extraterrestrial race that is able to actually get through our defenses and the Palladian defenses and other galactic defenses, there would be a more sense of panic. But we don't get that. We're getting them come into press conferences, say, we think we're observing, threats. This is not a conspiracy theory. We think we're observing threats. Great. That's fucking fantastic. You mentioned the conspiracy theory tag. All right, bud. Let's really get into it. Goodness me. So, we're going to be moving on through. So 2020, that was late 2019. Now we are into 2020. And now these aren't all of the images that he found. These are the best ones that he found. So taking a look at this one early on in 2020. So one thing that we can very much say right off the bat with this is that, holy crap, they are right up against that radar, that camera lens. Holy crap. That is ridiculous. One thing to also note, hold on, Junk. One thing to also note is that the consistency of their shape is two-dimensional. I want to say that would be the angle of the lens, and that it's not picking up the other side, because we must remember Earth or space is very, very cold. And if you're looking at something infrared, it's going to try its best to pick up the closest heat signature, even if it doesn't get this closest object. Go, Junk.
Well, yeah, it's like the sun, you see a flat sun, but it really is spherical. And so the idea, when I saw these were pretty shocking to me, because before then, they were just so out in the distance, but we got a close capture of these. And if you look at the one to the farthest left, you really see that rounded the rounded backing, which I think the uniform nature allows it to traverse peacefully. maybe a little bit more dynamic in ways that it needs to be, either when entering atmospheres or, just traveling through space. But I do believe there's a good chance these could be scout ships. It's hard for me to think that these would be absolutely massive. I mean, beyond what we saw with the USS Hike something, I forget the name of that. The naval craft carrier.
Yeah, let's just call it that. That's a too big of a clusterfuck of a
Yeah,
name.
yeah. So something around that size. I would not consider these motherships, but they are absolutely beautiful to look at. And it could even be considered, if you look off to the one to the second to the left and the one off to the right, that their broken appendages could be that of a modulation in accordance, that they could be awaiting modulation to complete the other half, which was another fascinating rabbit hole I went down. But to this day, these are probably the closest to the lens cigar craft that I found, and they're just absolutely beautiful. I love looking at these things and realizing that no, this isn't space rocks, this is something. And this led me down so many different paths to find more like craft. So yeah, you can keep going. It's amazing.
So this one is kind of like a precursor into Junk's journey into realizing that, holy crap, they sometimes also travel in pairs. Holy shit. So yeah, here we go. Like we're starting to see formations. We're very clearly seeing the cigar shape. And one thing that I do want to make note is, once again, this is a good reference and a good image into looking at the much larger cigar and the scout ship. Now, I can't give you any type of scale. I would say this is probably that HUSS Hittenglogger, I don't know what the fuck to call it, and then a smaller scout ship, so essentially a large aircraft carrier, and then relatively a destroyer size type of craft, something that can very easily maneuver around tight areas because of scale reasons. A destroyer would be much more maneuverable than it normally would be in Earth's atmosphere on the sea, so all of that fun jazz. But it's still fascinating to look at and think about and put on the lens of something sci-fi, because essentially this is what we're looking at. We are looking at a real-life sci-fi scenario, and it's fascinating to look at, but it's also scary to look at, because it just goes to show you how much we've been lied to. So again, another one just reflecting off of light. Again, very pronounced. We got a little bit of glitching in the actual image of it, of the radar, but overall, it somehow still came out solid. And once again, there's no way that this is, an asteroid. It's too defined. It's too perfect. Now, I was actually hoping he would have this one in the list, because I kind of just quickly put them all together in the folder. So this is a very good example showing you this right here. It's a planet. That is another planet. So you can kind of see how the light is reflecting off of the planet, where it's much more elongated. It's very fine. It's kind of got like its own little ring around it. Whereas you got this solid fucking cigar. That's wow. If that doesn't say man-made, I don't know what.
Yeah, this one was a very important one for me, because it confirmed that fleeting doubt in my mind that something of a horizontal nature in the frame, makes no sense at all. Space doesn't have direction, but in this degree, it was absolutely confirming that these things are their own solid bodies, just as Scuba mentioned, that these are very tangible craft, rounded at the corners, as you see. And again, you don't really see them alone too often, but this was just perfectly in view. And yeah, it made me stand up in my seat when I saw it. I was so excited, but you're going to see a lot more of these.
Absolutely. So this one kind of this one gives me chills, because just looking at it, just an entire armada, a fleet of them just going in different directions, either in the same direction or whatever, or they're all just enjoying the highway. Like, we don't know, but it's still fascinating to see all of these out here. And if you're looking at the fader, the ones that are more faded, I would say those are the ones that are more far away, considering like more deep space out far past the sun, whereas the more brighter ones are relatively close. So once again, 3 of them in a very nice formation. No, sorry, 6 of them. No, 5 of them. Sorry, 5. And it's, it's just so fascinating to sit here and look at this, because you're witnessing the different scales and sizes in real time right now. And this is fascinating, because you have, a bigger mothership-esque, a smaller, just slightly smaller than that one, then even smaller, and then even smaller, and then even smaller, and more far away. Like, it's so fascinating. Just gonna scroll through these at this point, because I don't know what else to say. I mean, they're just so, it's just so confirming to me, and I hope it's confirming to everybody out there who's watching and in the call. On to 2021.
Yeah, Scuba, something I want to say is that the inner believer in me wanting to gain like hard evidence of UFOs to really confirm my monkey mind that there are these craft existing, this was just a treasure trove. And yeah, just like the other one, you see these, I always like to imagine them going out into space, like we're looking at them as they're like exiting the planet or something of the sort. But it's so fascinating. And what you're going to see is that there's such a uniformity about all of them. Like, there are certain things, certain anomalies in this, like like, oh my God, this one. Oof. This was one of my favorites. Yeah. And this is where I started doing the zoom in series so we can get a better glimpse at these. But yeah, they are very solid. They all have the same texture, and this wouldn't be the case if we're talking about random space debris or random comets or all these things, because it's commonly repeated over and over and over. So this is a phenomena, and I think this is what we should really be focusing on. This is important.
Because as much as we want to say that we're looking at photos, we're looking at video, we're just going to be real with you guys. We are in an age of AI. That shit can get so doctored. This cannot. This is pure, I want to say pure science. This is pure, detecting light and heat signatures. Like, you cannot forge this. This is concrete as you can get in our information age. That's why it's so important, because this is not something that can easily just be thrown there. This is not an anomaly that can just happen. It's too perfect.
Yeah. I mean, it really, oh yeah, that was a good one too. I remember that. Um, you're right, Scuba. I mean, you're going to see, we're at the end of this episode, probably, we're going to go through and I'm going to show you how fast these images go by, because what you're seeing is a still frame of a 72-hour period of graphics. And I do believe, man, I could be wrong, but I think it's every 14 or every 20 minutes the satellite snaps a picture. So we're getting that kind of duration between photographs, and when you're watching it in its raw original data, it just looks like a flip book. It's so quick. And you wouldn't notice if there was an anomaly in there unless you have a trained eye or even patience like I do, because I go frame by frame to capture these things because I care. And that's why I brought this out to the conscious community, because I'm already convinced that these things are, actually piloted, and it's a real situation happening out in the solar system that they're completely unacknowledging. NASA will never tell you about this. The news will never tell you about this. You may have some people with private testimonials from Kansas saying they saw one of these in the sky, but is that really going to convince the masses, or is this going to convince the masses? So I've compiled these and I've stored them. Believe me, they are safe beyond a doubt. Even if my entire phone gets hacked, nothing's taking these away. So we are good. We have evidence. This may come up in the future, Scoob. We might have to present these, and that's why you're quite possibly, everybody in here, you're quite possibly looking at history, and I think that's really important to be part of as well, because your impact of observing it is also important.
Absolutely. I also want to make note, so I'm not butchered in the comments. The organization is a little off. We are now at 2022, and we haven't hit the 2022 mark yet, so I do apologize. That is my fault on the organization of the photos. But yeah, just want to make note that the organization at this point is a little messed up, but the message still stands that he goes through this pretty much every week and just finds so many different anomalies. This one too, this one's fascinating, right as the sun's about to go off, and it's just chilling there. And one thing that Junk and I have very much speculated on, and it feels a little bit more clear as the sun gets more active, that to some degree some of these crafts are harnessing solar energy, whether it's for their own internal power system, or they're harnessing it for weapons, or just general power for other things that go on in space. Because if you can just tap into the sun, you have an infinite energy source. Hence a Dyson sphere. So now, I guess we were on the 2022 tag. I wasn't even paying attention. Holy crap. All right, so day 1 of this year. Look at that. Day 1 of this year, New Year's Day at 3 in the morning, this was captured. Fascinating. And here we go again. And like I said, right as the sun's going off, they are chilling right by it. And now, like I said, like we've been saying with scale, this has to be the size of a city. Looking at the scale of next to the sun and knowing how big the sun is and seeing how big that fucking thing is, that has to be the size of a city. Like the entire city. Like if it were to land, the entire shadow would take up the city.
Yeah, one of the fascinating things about this one is that I would probably say this is like mass scale. This would be a mothership, because the length alone, especially when you compare it to the other ones of a short, stocky body compared to this one, which is almost noodle-esque, it's very interesting to conceive that it could be, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 modules in length. and those modules could be as long as a regular one. So, I think this is probably the best way, especially when we're talking about cargo holds. You think about a train, right? It's not just a train, and you don't just put things in the top of the train. You add carts and for different purposes. And I believe that's probably the same method going into this phenomenon itself.
That's a very, very beautiful point. And I know we didn't go into the cargo bits like we said we were going to, but I feel like we touched on a lot of points that kind of dance around that idea, because it does get very, very dark. And I kind of want to keep this conversation a little bit on the lighter side, mainly because this is an exciting thing to talk about, and we don't really need to go into what they possibly are doing, because at the end of the day, although we can speculate all we want, we don't want to put lives at risk, because there hasn't been anybody substantial who has come forward from this area. And I would love to see it. As dark as that testimony would be, I would love to see it, because it's definitely an enlightening experience for all of us that have been in the awakening community long enough. So, moving on. I guess, and this would be considered a scout ship. 23rd day in the year of the 23rd year at 8:18 in the morning. Just fascinating. And the detail of it. Although it's pixelated, the fact that we have this good detail and defined edges and, just really seeing it in the most authentic way we can. It's fascinating. That was a gunshot. Fun times. Scared the hell out of me. All right. So we have a planet and other UFO craft. Okay, that was another gunshot. What the hell? Fun times. Anyways. Moving on.
Strap.
Yeah, right. They're probably just shooting in the sky. Who knows? Might be a cap gun. Who knows? So this one's fascinating. This one kind of has like a energetic hue around it. This is something that I haven't personally witnessed before until just now, and this kind of leads me into the idea that they're siphoning some energy of the sun, or they're dealing with a direct blast from a solar flare, and they're just tanking it. They're just tanking it and absorbing it, which is fascinating.
Yeah, Scuba, something I want to mention that you've said multiple times now about harnessing plasma energy would be a very interesting integration, considering that these are free energy devices. Most likely, all anti-gravitics are free energy devices, and at what core they operate is speculation, of course. We don't know what kind of drives they're using, ion, etc., but I have seen many in the wake of these solar flares and CMEs that seems as if they're there for a purpose. And sometimes it's anticipatory. They're waiting for it to happen, or they're currently amidst it. But nevertheless, it's fascinating, especially if they were having some kind of toroidal siphoning unit to gather the plasma, because I believe that many of these craft, especially the hull, is so durable that it would be willing to withstand all of the radiation, every harmful thing, because as Scuba alluded to earlier, trillions of dollars have gone missing. We don't need to go into that too often, but it's been put to use. Let's just say that. It's probably, they haven't, you don't put this big of a craft in space unless you're absolutely sure it can withstand any climate it's subjected to. That could be here in our solar system, or it can be in a different galaxy. But what I will say is that I don't believe that these things are local to the Milky Way. I do believe that maybe the more ancient ones are able to go beyond our galaxy, but the man-made ones are well equipped to go beyond Earth, let alone Mars, the moon. And gosh, Scuba, we can just go so deep. We're gonna keep it shallow tonight. I know. We'll keep it shallow. We'll keep it safe.
So that's all of the photos that he has compiled, all of the best photos. So we're going to go back to where we were in the questions. As soon as I get there, there we go. All right. So get rid of this. Open that. All right. So will the mainstream media continue to push the UAP agenda to mislead the public on UFOs? Yes, they are going to. Why? Because the mainstream lies. That's all they do. That's all they will continue to do. So the best way forward, which basically is this next question, is doing the hard work of getting into the nitty gritty, finding the stuff that people can't deny, like radar, like light imaging, images that are so clear that they cannot be doctored in any way, shape, or form, which is hard, I know, but as time goes on, we're going to get better and better ways to capture images of them and capture video of them. Although AI is super smart and good at stuff like this, it still can't get the finer details that are needed in order to make it real. It can be believable, but it will never be real. Junk, do you have any final words?
Yeah, the best way of disclosing UFOs to the world would have to be spreading by word, voice to mouth. You have to talk to your friends and family. You do. I know so many people have sheltered their opinions on UFOs for fear of being called a conspiracy theorist or crazy, but the truth is they exist. You live in a marvelous, fantastic universe full of life and extreme, rare, exotic technologies. And that's what's exciting, because at the very beginning, we mentioned Star Wars, but I like to think of a Star Trek universe in which there are many federations, there are galactic councils of which orchestrate the ongoings of planetary systems and the expansion and evolution of technological advancement. So it's not a matter of you feeling judged anymore for saying, I think I saw a UFO. You have to boldly go out and say, I have pictures of UFOs. I have a website now that you can find in the Mystery School chat that directly links you to the same source that I use for all of my findings. And trust me, I don't want to gatekeep any of this. I would love if I could inspire another out there to do the diligence and the work and to go through these graphics and find your own pieces of evidence and then tag your name on it, keep your credit, because we're here to show that these things are prominently in our solar system. They are completely influencing our society, and disclosure happens now. We're not going to wait for something to land on the White House lawn. It doesn't mean anything anymore. What matters is the level of secrecy that's held and how you can liberate your mind from that own apparatus of control. How can you become a cosmic explorer, a knower of the infinite beyond? And I think this is exactly how we do it. We start to go out and we do CE5s. We explore. Every time we're walking around or we're in our car, we're looking at the sky. You have to think so many people are looking down. I want you to start looking up. Start to imagine what would be out there And you never know. You might see something that nobody else would see. And that's going to trigger an internal confirmation, as I hope this night did with you with the cigar craft. And you're going to carry those stories on, and it's going to be this daisy chain of awareness. And that is what's really going to ripple throughout the collective beyond artificial intelligence and control and mainstream media indoctrination. You are the seeker, and you have found exactly what you have sought. This is believing. And the more you lean into this amazing mystical paradise of a cosmic realm, you start to gain a macrocosmic awareness that pushes you into an intergalactic mindset. So I am so grateful, and Scuba's showing you all these videos. I'll let you speak more about this, but that's basically what I want to say.
No, that was so beautifully said. I couldn't said it better myself. I mean, honestly, you are disclosure. I know that's so cliche of us to say, but you getting the grassroots movement and showing people that this stuff is undeniable. And Junk made up a very good point earlier. It's 1 in 7 people know about UFOs and believe UFOs exist and aliens are out there. The trick question is, how many of them believe that they are here with good intentions and that the story is much larger than they like to let on? Because let's be honest, just saying that there are aliens out there is just disingenuous to the entire movement, because of course there are aliens out there. Of course there are extraterrestrials out there. Of course there are beings of higher intelligence, of, larger enlightenment and a closer connection to the infinite creator. Of course that exists. That why shouldn't it? It's a vast universe. But the question now is no longer are they out there. The question now is, what do we do with this information? Do we call upon them to show themselves? Do we start building our own and see them for ourselves? Do we take back the secret space program from the Nazi fucks and do better? Or do we just let it happen? Do we just let the process happen? That is the question that we need to ask ourselves in this moment. It is no longer if they exist or not. It is, what are we going to do about it? And that is the key. Alrighty, everybody, that basically ends the night for our Cigar Craft Phenomena talk. I appreciate you all coming. Now we have one more thing to discuss here. And Mr. junkDNA, take it away.
Well, thank you, Scuba. We have a mystery school that I've developed in preparation for the adept student of the cosmos, in which we expand our consciousness together under the class known as Know Thyself, Path of the Initiate. And this series has been going on for about a month and a half now. This is our volume 2 series of this month, and it will carry on to the next. And this Sunday, I invite you all to join us for our Third Eye event, speaking all about the pineal gland, extrasensory perception, and how we can connect with others. It is the gateway to the soul, and you can find the RSVP link bit.ly/Know Thyself Volume 2. It's a free masterclass, and we are going to be joined by Sendreens as our guest speaker. It's going to be a very, very powerful session. If you've experienced Know Thyself before, you know exactly what to expect. But if you haven't, I invite you to explore that curiosity, come with us, meditate, and start to gain that macrocosmic awareness and wisdom of your soul, integrating all of that divine initiate power within you. And I'm very, very grateful to have the space to talk about this. Thank you, Scuba.
course, my friend, I'm happy to give you the space. But, yeah, that is all she wrote this evening. We will be back next week with another spicy topic. I'd say arguably spicier than this one. But until then, have yourselves a wonderful rest of your week. Have yourselves a wonderful rest of your night. And as always, keep on seeking. Good night, guys.